Hello, Brav. We're back with Foxfire Chew. Ghost stories. Boogers, witches, and Haints. We shall continue on page 344 with Mrs. R.L. Elliot. Well, my mother, you see, she was raised in a house that was haunted. She said every rainy night that there was always noise to be heard. And her daddy would send them out, because a lot of nights would be like hogs under the floor, and he'd send them out with lanterns. They couldn't see nothing, but they could hear it. It was just like hogs. And when you get around there, why, you wouldn't see nothing. They'd just hear this noise. And then maybe a night or two later, it'd go like horses, just different noises all the time. And her daddy was just kept a running all the time. They go just like a big bunch of hogs under the house rooting. You know how they'll do? I don't believe you can see a spirit. I think you can just hear them. And where anybody is killed, there's always a noise to be heard. That's really true. Now, I've experienced a lot of that myself, and I know that is true. I've been around a lot of these places, where people had been killed. I've lived up here at the hotel where Mr. Ramey was killed. One night I was up there, I was out alone, just me and my son, and we heard a bunch of people coming down the highway a-crying. Moon was shining just as bright as day, and I stood out and listened, kept listening, and they kept coming closer and closer and come on up to the house. Seemed like the sound just went around the house, but I never did see nobody. But it went like a whole bunch of people. So I just went in the house. I got scared and went in the house, and locked the door. Then one night across the road from my house, it looked like a little calf out on the side of the road just playing around, and they shot at it and everything, and it just kept dancing right on playing around. They never could hit it or nothing. Just the spirit, Mr. Blank and his wife, they saw it too. We all saw it. The moon was shining and Hit was just across the road there. It was just playing ever there, just like a newborn calf. It is just a spirit of some kind. And my uncle, he said he lived in a house over yonder, and after his mother died, one night him and his brother was in the bed and something woke him up, choking him, and he said he tried every way to get his brother awake and couldn't get him awake, and he lit the lamp, and he said when he lit the lamp, it looked like a big animal that had black hair, and it was a big old animal, and he said it made another dive at his throat, to choke him again. He never did get his brother awake, but he followed this thing in the front room, and he said then that thing went up just like a ball of fire through the top of the house. You see, that was a spirit. That wasn't nobody. I went up through the top of the house right there and in the room where his mother had died. There'd been a lot of things seen, and I believe in ghosts. Now up here right above Rob Williams, there's a house there where a man poisoned his wife. There's always things to be seen there. My mother saw a man with no head on there. We used to go up there and play. They had a downstairs and an upstairs in it, and a bunch of us children was upstairs playing, and they, as a baby, cried downstairs, cried just like a real baby. So we tore the top out and come out the top at the house. And one night, my aunt was coming up to our house, and this big old thing caught her in the road and choked her like a bear. We hit it on sleep. We hit sleep on that porch at night. They could hear it lay down on that porch, but they never did know what it was. And her husband's brother hit it with an axe handle one night, and Hit jumped back across the fence, but they never did see what it was. It was a big thing, like a bear. So I've always believed in myself. And at Miss Maggie's house, there's always a noise to be heard there at some time. She lived there for years and years, and she'd tell us lots of times about bumblebees in the wintertime. You never hear bumblebees in the wintertime, but she hear them swarming in the house, And my uncle lived in a place where some nights it would go like every dish in the cupboard would fall out. Said he'd get up and look, and everything was just like it was. Said maybe the next night he'd go like somebody poured out a bushel of corn right on the floor, and it wouldn't be a thing. Now up in the mountain, my grandfather killed a man. They was both drunk, and he killed him up on the mountain. They got to fighting some way over a still that was cut down on his place, and he cut his head off and laid it up on a stump, cut it plumb off and laid it up on a stump. And then he served 20 years in prison. Well, he got rich in prison. He waited on a train robber, and he brought back, I don't know, at that money. But on that mountain, you can pass that stump and you can hear things out of a night. Anybody on a rainy night, if they want to hear them, ought just to walk down that road and they can hear them. I took my baby up on the mountain one time and was coming back, bringing him in a little old carriage. Just as I got even with that place, I heard a singing. You never did hear such a racket. And Bov, I drove, and Bov, I drove him off that mountain in a hurry. I brought that carriage down the road. I got away from that place. I was scared teetotally to death. Mrs. Ardella Grant. I seen him with my own eyes. Of course, the woman that was with me is dead. I couldn't bring you to her, but if she was alive, I could. But there's a house at Hewitt's. I guess you heard tell of there in North Carolina. There's a big house they call the White House up there. And everybody that stayed there would hear something or something say something. Well, one night we went out there on the end of the porch and the lights was shining out the windows, and they has a barn out yonder, great big old barn they had. We was out there on the porch, and this old lady, she come out from under that barn now. I'm telling you the truth, exactly the way we seen it. Well, I didn't say a word, nor she did either. We watched her till she came up close to us, and she had her hands out like that. Mrs. Grant puts her arms out like a sleepwalker in front of her, and she is just as quiet and the birdies sting. She was old, and she had her hands out like that, and she came up close, and this woman that was with me, she said, "Lord, child, do you see that?" And we run back in the house, and we told the men, it was a boarding house then, and we told the men what we saw, and they got up and went out on the porch. They thought maybe someone had stepped out at that barn to camp or something, but they didn't find nobody. Not a sign of anybody, no tracks nor nothing. Now that did scare us. And then down below there, what they call the mud cut, there's a curve in the road and a railroad went around down there. And down below there, you could see a man, his legs, and a lantern. You could see the lantern and his legs. And he'd come up on the railroad and he'd walk down that railroad to the top of the grade, they called it. And he'd just get out of sight till he'd pop up right in the same place. That starts about 9 o'clock, and I'll bet you go right up there tonight at 9 o'clock and see the very sight. He'd go along and disappear and start right back where he started from. He'd just keep it going, You could see the lantern swinging in his legs, and right back down the railroad he'd go. Now, lots of people seen that. Now, it must have been in time, some time or another. They'd been somebody murdered there. At this point, Mr. Grant said that he had heard that a Bill McCarthy had killed his brother there by mistake, thinking he was a groundhog. Big groundhog. Then up the road, there was a second house that the railroad men boarded at, Now, I didn't hear that. This is what they told me, but now they told it, and I think it was true. Somebody just went like somebody come in and thrown down a load of lumber and got the hammering, just like he was making a coffin. Well, it just worried somebody that lived there. It was that way continually, and it sounded like it was in the wall, at times. And he went on, tore that ceiling off, and he found a little baby skeleton in there. Judd Carpenter. One night I was passing along, the moon is shining pretty bright. It is along about 10 o'clock at night. Directly I heard something come scraping along behind me. I turned around and looked around. About that time, that thing hit me right in the bend of the legs. Felt just like old dry cowhide. I danced away but couldn't see a thing. I stood around there a while, kept looking around but never did see nothing. Finally, I just walked off and left it. Never did find out what it was. And we used to live in old John Sanders' house there. There is a winder there at the Chimbley, and right next to the Chimbley. And they does something every night or two, would come there at the winder and moan and groan and make funny rackets. One night it climbed up in the winder. The winder was made out of planks, He just come up there on the winder and scratched and went on and kept jumping and scratching. After a while, my daddy decided he'd get up and see what it was. When he got out there, it vanished away. Couldn't see nothing. They said there was a man killed in there, claimed it was hainted. They was right. And I passed along by the Methodist church one time. It was about 11 or 12 o'clock in the night, but the moon was shining and the church doors happened to be open. So I heard something running, jumping across the benches in there and making the awfulest racket I ever heard. I didn't have no light and no kind of or nothing. But I went on inner, went plumb back in the back of the church. The racket disappeared, then I couldn't see nothing. Couldn't see a thing in the world. And the moon is shining in at the doors and through the windows too, so I could see pretty well. So I walked on down the road a piece, and directly I heard a little racket behind me. I just turned around and looked. It is just like something dragging a little old sheepskin or something, but I never could see a thing. Hillard Green, ghosts are just the devil after somebody, and they're seeing these things for some low-down meanness that they've done. It's in their eye, and in their mind is what it is. People will see things where they ain't nothing. A ghost is a spirit or something that comes to somebody that they've done evil to, harmed them some way or other, maybe killed somebody. They're things that way that can be seen and heard, you know. The Bible speaks about these ghosts and witches and so on. You may not believe in a witch, but they are, for the Bible tells us. I've heard of them. I've seen them. I've seen people that could witch. They can do just anything they want to. Now, I've seen an old woman down on Cowie where I lived, and I know she was a witch. Alan down there, he wanted to go and plow somebody's garden, and his mother said, no, you're not going to go and plow that garden, says, you're going to plow mine first or you won't plow nobody's. And he said, I'm going to plow over there, and then I'll plow for you. She says, you'll not do it. And he went out there to get his old steer to go plowing, you know. That steer just fell over like he's dead, and he is dead nearly. And he lay there 3 days, and he never eat a bite or nothing. Well, Alan took on about his steer, and he tried to doctor it and everything, and finally at last he says, I'm going to have to kill that steer to get him out of my way. His mammy says, oh, you don't have to do that. I can go out there and lay my hand on him, and that steer will get up if you go out there and plow my garden. He says, well, Ma, I'll plow it then. She just walked out there to that steer and laid her hand on it, and that steer jumped up just the same as there wasn't a thing in God's world the matter with it. I've seen a lot of things that she done, and I know she could do anything in the world she wanted to that way to destroy you. That was 47 years ago when that happened. I was living right close to them. I seen her get mad one time and witch a baby. By gosh, till it died because she got mad at the parents. There's something to it. You don't know when it comes to their power. Be like old Mrs. Blank over there. Here it was. Lived right over here across the ridge over here. She got her a book and was going to learn how to witch. Somebody come to her, you know, told her where to go out to out there on the ridge and sit down on that log, and then they'd come and learn her. Well, when they come to her, they said, now you put one hand under your foot and one on top of your head and say all the rest belongs to the devil. She said that she couldn't do that at all. There was somebody standing there, but she didn't know who it was, and she said, all that belongs to God Almighty, and that person was gone, and she didn't see nobody and didn't know nothing. She just got up and went to the house and threw her book away. A spirit can appear to you any time that way if you'll serve the devil. Let's see how many pages are left here. I think I got time to start another chapter. Yeah. It's at the end of the Boogers and Witches. Maybe I'll just hold off on this one. Yeah, I'll hold off on this. Until next time, bruv. Goodbye.